Welcome to NFL Daily. I'm Greg Rosenthal, and I'm here in the Chris Wessling podcast studio, surprised by everything about this intro, and I love it. Yes, it's going to be a spooky version of NFL Daily, a.k.a. the latest meeting of Honkers Anonymous, myself and Jordan Rodrigue.
The haunted honkers.
Yeah, we're here. We're here in the studio, and we're going to be talking about what we're haunted by a little later in the show. Honking Anonymous would have been the better title. We both like to
Did you
honk.
ever say something and just like immediately regret it? Yeah.
Yeah, we both, if we were basketball players, Jordan, we'd both have high usage rates, Colleen will be back. I know the schedule's been a little crazy on the See You Next Tuesdays, but I'm really excited the next couple of weeks. We have big shows planned. Colleen back in the mix for those. And yes, QB Island just 2 weeks from now. And I noticed it's been pretty stable. If you look at the players on QB Island, they're all playing great other than Lamar Jackson, who's been hurt. But he's coming back on Thursday, and he's still Lamar freaking Jackson. So we'll talk about the Thursday night football game in just a little bit. The city is abuzz with
I know.
Dodgers glee.
We all stayed up and watched the game. Electric, 18 innings. I was telling you before the show, I went to bed the minute that Shohei Ohtani said, I would like to be asleep as soon as possible.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
If he says it, you should listen to that man. I was at the last 18-inning World Series game, so it's a reminder. That doesn't mean just because you win that one that it's going to carry over. Let's talk some news. Let's talk some NFL. We have a decent amount of news right off the top of the show. Then we'll get to that segment and TNF. Let's start with the latest quarterback change. Tyler Shough will start. Difficult first matchup against the Los Angeles Rams defense. Been playing well lately. Good pass rush, obviously. The timing does make sense, even though it's unfair. It's like, you tell children very often, life is not fair. I don't think this change is fair to Spencer Rattler, and yet I totally understand it. I think both things can be true.
Multiple things can be true. We love to say that in here. This is a tough draw to get for your first NFL start if you're Tyler Shough, because as you mentioned, it's not just that the Rams front seven's playing very, very well and really aggressive rushing the pass. They're stopping the run really well. They're also coming off a bye week. So not only that, but they are rested. So this is a tough draw if you're Tyler Shough.
I thought he looked good when I went to rewatch. Live, I was kind of looking at results and thinking about the three pretty off-target throws that I think Tyler Shough is going to have. I don't think he's as accurate a quarterback as Rattler, for instance. But I think he's going to have more high-level throws. And I thought he was relatively decisive in that game. They moved the ball a little bit. I get it. He's your number 40 overall pick. The Rattler thing stinks because I think he played really well for 6 weeks. But looking big picture for the Saints, I think they kind of got exactly what they needed to out of the Rattler evaluation. I think he earned himself a solid 8 to 10 years in the league by the way he played these first 6 weeks. And he's going to be a good backup for either the Saints or another team, or maybe get a chance to start somewhere else down the line. I think they learned that about him, and now you find out about the second-round pick.
He could even become the new prime meridian for backup quarterbacks eventually in his career trajectory. I could see it happening. I really could. I think he gives you enough to potentially be on that type of trajectory.
The weird thing is I felt like he had sort of a Kellen Moore governor on him the whole time. Like he wasn't playing his truly freestyling way of football, but he did it really well, and then I think he got a little too amped up for that Caleb game, and it just went a little south, but he didn't even play that bad. It's just time to see the young kid. Let's talk about who's not going to be on the field this week, including Patrick Surtain. He is week to week with a pec strain. The insiders did that thing where they were like, this is good news. It's like, no, it's not good news. Like, that would be very painful if you had a pec strain and he's missing games, and multiple insiders, Ian Rappaport included, said he could go to IR, which is usually a pretty strong indication he will go to IR at some point, I'm guessing later this week. So, the Broncos without Surtain, it'll be an interesting test of a really good defense, a good secondary, but removing the defensive player of the year.
Yeah, well, I thought that I thought Vance Joseph had a good schematic plan based on, missing him in and out of the game throughout the first half before he finally left the game for good after that first half. And we were worried about this because when I saw that shot of him walking to the locker room, he wasn't grabbing his shoulder. He was grabbing like right to the outside of his armpit, which indicated that it was going to be a pectoral issue. I think where you're relieved, everything's relative, is that it's not torn. If it's torn, obviously you're just not coming back. At least there's a chance, especially potentially activation before the postseason, if he does go on IR, that a strain or a sprain can heal a little bit. But it's the safety. I thought the safeties played fine. The problem that they're going to have is that everybody's going to throw at Riley Moss and try to draw these penalties. And also that Jahdae Barron, we saw really good stuff from him last week, but that hasn't really been consistent throughout the entire season. So while I do think they got a really good performance in light of the sudden change circumstances of having your best defensive player on and off the field repetitively through the first half, I thought they looked really solid. And having a whole week to plan for this, yes, there's a drop-off without Patrick Surtain, but I do think that Vance Joseph's got some good scheme to help play around that, essentially.
It's funny because Riley Moss might get targeted less now because he's the best quarterback.
No, because people see the flags flying every single time, and they're
fair.
like still gonna try to get this guy to PI.
I loved Bomani Jones's take last week that the pass interference against Riley Moss at the end of that game against the Giants was racist. That they didn't believe that Riley could play such good coverage. It was a terrible call. But he's the best cornerback probably on the team. They brought in Chris Abrams-Drain for a lot of that game. And then you mentioned Jahdae Barron, which people probably haven't been tracking as much, but was a really highly thought of first-round pick, added to a deep secondary, lost the slot cornerback job pretty early in the season to Jaquan McMillan, hasn't really played that much, so he might get in the mix a lot more too. And they've got a lot of big games coming up on the schedule, including the Kansas City Chiefs in 2 weeks. Looking forward to that. We got the trade deadline coming up. We did the most interesting potential trade targets. Me and Nick Shook. We had a couple receivers on that list. Check out Monday night's show if you want that. That's after the Chiefs Commanders recap. Brian Thomas Jr. was not on that list because we wanted to go with the most realistic ones. And this one felt a little far-fetched, although possible. Interesting. Liam Cohen addressed the report from the Athletics' Diana Rossini that Brian Thomas Jr. could potentially be available.
We have no plans on moving Brian Thomas Jr. At all. Saw something about that over the weekend. I talked to him for a good amount of time this morning, and it's just a good reset for a lot of these guys to come in fresh, 4-3 with everything ahead of us. Regardless, good, bad, or indifferent, what's happened in the first 7 games, we all have an opportunity to write a narrative. We own the narrative, and so I got a lot of confidence in him. I really do believe that we can turn the corner and get better in the pass game that way.
Not a lot surprises me from the insiders, but when I saw that note in Diana's column over the weekend, and she usually has some pretty good nugs in there, I thought, where is that coming from? That's fascinating. That is not what the Jaguars obviously would want out there at a precarious point in their season.
Well, that's why he responded that way.
Maybe. I mean, sometimes coaches are two-faced, or sometimes there's different parts of the organization that have different agendas. Either way, it got out there. You're right. It probably wouldn't be from the Jaguars. They would not want that to be out there. And he said he addressed it, with Brian Thomas Jr. personally for a while, but not out there for nothing. So I find that interesting. It has to come from somewhere. Maybe it's other teams trying to...
Maybe a motivational tactic. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why there's a lot of different things at a lot of different times before the trade deadline.
Brian Thomas Jr. is a second-year player, though. Would he hate being traded away from a guy who just throws him a bunch of hospital balls in a system that's not quite working for him? Man, if he was available, that would be fascinating. I find this Jaguars team still as fascinating.
Well, he's saying he's not available. He's pretty much shutting the door.
He said he had no plans. I've heard a lot of coaches say we have no plans, which is, to me, the ultimate 95% he's here, but I can always say plans change.
Jared Goff is our quarterback right now.
Right now is even more dangerous. See, that's where you mark it down from like 95% to like 50%.
You probably get a first-round pick.
For Brian Thomas Jr.? Hell yeah. You get a first-round plus. I'd still evaluate him as like a top 10 to 12 wide receiver, quote unquote, asset in the league just because of the contract and because of his age. But it is fascinating that you have to look at both Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. and say they were playing better last year. Weird.
There's a lot of good stuff in that. The Roger McCreary kind of, Diana was circulating the Roger McCreary reporting, and he did get traded. The Rams picked him up. The Rams needed cornerback help with Ahkello Witherspoon on injured reserve right now. They're hoping it's shortish term. It's like a 12-week recovery process for Ahkello Witherspoon. And their coverages have been really dictated by that injury. And Darius Williams is a little banged up. So trading for Roger McCreary was a thing that they had to do.
Why are the Titans just desperate to get off useful cornerbacks? They traded him for nothing. It was a 5th to 6th round swap. I did mention it very briefly on Monday night, but I found that mystifying. I know he's coming to the end of his contract, but he's a good young player. The last good young player they traded away was Jarvis Brownlee, who immediately became like one of the Jets' better players in the secondary. So I just don't get it. What's the point of trading if you don't get literally anything back? You mentioned IR and injuries for the Rams. The Rams put Tutu Atwell on IR, and I mentioned that in context with something you noted, how players can be traded off IR, which not that interested in Atwell, who could be a rotational piece for someone. But Trevon Diggs was placed on IR for the Cowboys after what was reported as a concussion, and he's still in the concussion protocol. But after a week being out with a concussion, then they placed him on injured reserve, and Jerry Jones indicated that Diggs needed to be in better shape in a press conference after last Cowboys game.
Jerry Jones just said some What?
Yeah. And
sorry to the
look, they indicated that, look, maybe he wasn't physically ready to be back from his torn ACL. Micah Parsons, for instance, was asked about it, and he said he thought the Cowboys really did Trevon Diggs dirty by essentially forcing him to get ready for week 1 when he physically wasn't ready. He's been on the field all year. And we say all this because Trevon Diggs was a first-team All-Pro 4 years ago, and then a good player the year after that. He did back up that season, and this contract and this injury has just been fascinating. So weird and not good for the Cowboys defense. And I do think the Cowboys could potentially take advantage of that rule that you can trade players on IR with Diggs specifically.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You've seen some difference-making players move that way. Aqib Talib was traded, 2018 after that rule change.
So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. You mentioned the pec strain being a relief for Patrick Surtain. Unfortunately, no relief for the Bills and Ed Oliver. He has a torn biceps.
It's a bummer.
He's just the biggest difference maker they have up front right now. Joey Bosa's been okay. They're adding Michael Hoyt and Ogunjobi into the mix, but that's a tough one because they're very likely not going to get him back this year. Maybe there's some scenario if they make the Super Bowl deep in the playoffs that it becomes a question, but barring a trade, and I think they are about as likely as literally any team in the NFL to make an eye-opening trade. And I think defensive line would maybe be their number one target. Yeah,
it should be. They're down to and listen, like Michael Hoyt's a good player. Larry Ogunjobi's a good player. Has had some really good years, but they're so thin along that defensive line. It's like Deion Walker, who's showed flashes, got some stuff to him. Greg showed flashes, but you can't account for depth, and you need more of it. So that's where I would say, yeah, I would think the Bills are on the phones right now trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah, and that trade deadline is a week from today. So we got a lot going on next week. We'll do some mid-season content. We'll do some trade deadline recap. It'll be fun. Wrapping up the news before we take a little break, just some quick notes. Carson Schlesinger, who I had as the defensive rookie of the year so far, has a high ankle sprain, reportedly not a particularly bad version of that, although I don't think there's any great versions, and they're in a bye, so maybe he doesn't miss too much time. He can still go get that award. You mentioned the McCreary trade. Shamar Turner, who is a high draft pick for the Bears, was getting snaps there in their defensive line rotation, has a torn ACL. He is out for the season. My Patriots signed Marcus Jones. We've been talking about the breakout season for Marcus Jones, who's got a 3-year deal. Good business by them, not just great on special teams, but really having an awesome season at cornerback. playing better than Carlton Davis, for instance, who's getting $17-20 million a year. And then the Bengals, I'm sorry to bring this up, guys, but they had a players-only defensive meeting. So season's over. Stick a fork in them. Done.
As it turns out, you can only somewhat revive your season when you have players-only meetings, but people are either late or don't show up to them.
Well, here's the thing, though. The Dolphins, I'm glad you mentioned that, they had a lot of those players-only meetings, and then they got blasted by the Browns. And from everything I heard, no players-only meetings the week after. And then now they're back in our lives. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to do a segment. What we're haunted by. NFL Daily. We're festive. Love Halloween week.
Ooh.
Love that it's kind of turning into a week. Maybe that's because it was on Friday this year, but there were a lot of Halloween parties last weekend. I was in New Orleans, the Halloween parade last weekend. Everyone was out in the quarter in their costumes already. So this has been a long buildup. I'm being neighborhood dad and having everyone come over before we all go out trick-or-treating. So I gotta get some stuff.
Are you gonna wear a costume?
I'm not gonna wear a costume.
I was gonna say, let's not get crazy.
I have and I would. And if someone just made it very easy for me, came up with a good idea that I could execute, maybe I would do it. But
I feel like
lazy.
I feel like you could come up with some really good ideas, but they would be so niche. That's
No, I'm not into being creative. I'm more into wear something inflatable. Inflatable, like the wavy arms guy from the car dealership. That was a big one.
I need this now. I need to see this.
I got some good pictures. It's on the IG. The segment, what we're haunted by. Maybe what people in the NFL are haunted by. It's a little open-ended. I will let you start.
Well, Ben Johnson and the Chicago Bears are absolutely haunted by all the penalties.
Oh, okay. Yes.
The penalties, Greg. 64 penalties for 533 total yards. 26 of those are pre-snap penalties. They have a 28 penalty differential on their opponents this season. And those numbers are per Scott Bear and Josh Dubow. And it's staggering. Ben Johnson seems to be closer and closer to his complete breaking point when it comes to expressing his true internal nerd rage over these penalties and how catastrophic they've been. It's been start, stop, start, stop, start, stop through all of these games. And there's starting to be the passive aggressive comments.
Oh.
Or the facade. I mean, I'm making a big deal over it. He's starting to crack, I think, a little bit. Let's listen to him.
We've been harping on it as a coaching staff, and when it results in a loss, I think it just magnifies the issue that was at hand.
How was that message received by your team leaders, your captains? And then what actions would you like to see them take this week to change those penalties?
Yeah, would like us to stay on side. So, it's simple. It's discipline. I think they're as fed up with it as everyone is in the building. And so they understand it's just not what good football teams do. And I think they're going to take ownership of it. I think we're going to be just fine.
Seems okay.
I know. I'm making a thing over it because he's haunted by it.
Yes.
Clearly, Greg. No,
he is though. It's been consistent.
It's been since camp. It's been since OTAs. It's stuff that he was losing his GD mind over on the practice field that still is not fixed. And he's had some pretty loaded comments previous to these most recent ones, just about how they are coaching it the way he wants it to be coached. And there's a little, I think, insinuation that maybe they're being inordinately penalized by the officiating and all of these things. You can't say it out loud. Obviously, you get a fine, but it's a mess. All of
the
that.
pre-snap stuff, though, is you can only blame yourself ultimately. And it's a really interesting point to make because I think it's so integral in what they do is all the pre-snap motion and everything. And I thought it was really interesting. After the bye week, he basically said, okay, we were conservative and didn't essentially run the offense I wanted to run the first month, but now we're going to run it. We're going to do all my stuff. And for the most part, it led to better rushing performance and things looking better when they did get the snap off. But ultimately, yeah, they need that to be the Bears team they want to be. Here's the good news. They play the Bengals, potentially the worst defense in the league, and then they play the Giants, which shockingly has the worst run defense since at least my subscription for FDN Fantasy allows, which is only to 2017, even worse than the Panthers a year ago. So they have two of the easiest possible matchups the next.
That adds to him being haunted by this, because if these are if the only reason that they can't get this offense off the ground finally for good are the self-inflicted penalties. I mean, I'm just saying, the nerd rage.
Yes, I love a little nerd rage. Okay, I'm gonna go more my own rage. But it's about Mike Tomlin, and it's about this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And I think sometimes it's the ghost of that steel curtain. It's the history of what the Pittsburgh Steelers are supposed to be back in the 1970s. But more than anything, it's the ghost of what Mike Tomlin said just a couple months ago. In August, Mike Tomlin said that this could be a historic defense. I got some clown calling me little bro on Twitter, being like, Tomlin never said that. Here's the quote.
Little bro.
I'm your big bro. You're my son. No. Here's Tomlin. We got to write that story, but we've got enough talent. We've got enough schematics to do big, big things. And when I say big things, I'm talking about historic things. That's Mike Tomlin on August 12th. Fast forward 2.5 months, and their offense is performing better than I expected, better than anyone could have expected. 12th in DVOA. They are more than doing their part. What are they in defense? Number 22 in defensive DVOA. Dead last in yards per drive allowed, bro. Get off the field. Meanwhile, you got the Rooney family spending $165 million on this defense. That is more than $25 million more than any other defense in the entire league. What's historic is how poorly they're playing.
And I know this is especially tough for you to say because the offense is playing adequately, Greg. And I
Good
know,
enough,
and
yes.
I know you want to I know you want to be a hater.
I am a hater.
And that's fine. But this is not just haunting, but downright frightening, because you can invest this much, not just money, but personnel and draft picks and all of these different.
Derek Harmon, first round pick this year. Keanu Benton struggling, second round pick.
And it's just not looking like they look slow. They look older, and they don't look like they are evolving. Some of that at the beginning of the year you could blame on injuries. You know, Joey Porter was in and out. Junior was in and out of the lineup. And at a certain point, Jalen Ramsey was dealing with a hamstring and all of these different things. Alex Highsmith was out. You could do that to a point. But now you're getting to the point where there is nowhere else to look. And Mike Tomlin is being asked about it.
Oh, he's looking elsewhere. Let's actually listen to Mike Tomlin. This was part of his press conference on Tuesday.
We certainly need to be better in third down than we've been, but it doesn't necessarily mean dramatic changes in terms of schematics and things of that nature.
Why not? I mean, that was what got me in that quote from before, was because of our schematics, because of our players, we can do historic things. I think their players are really good in the front.
Yeah.
I don't think it's perfect in the secondary, but I think it's more about the schematics that are the problem. And it bothered me. It's why I'm doing this segment, that he opened his press conference today talking about how frustrating it was that they couldn't put together a complete game plan and that the offense couldn't finish drives, that they were in third and too long too often, and they settled for too many field goals. And I'm thinking, you're opening that press conference with that when your defense, the one you said was going to be historic, just gave up 90-something points and 900 yards, or 60-something points over the last 2 weeks and 900-something yards. Like, look in the mirror. You should change the schematics. They've been the same since he got there.
Yeah, And what I think is probably frustrating to Steelers fans right now, and to you as well, Greg, is that some of the changes that they did make in terms of the personnel, and I do point to that Jalen Ramsey trade, or excuse me, the Jalen Ramsey trade as one of them, is you get some of these players who are supposed to be, and no, he's not playing like vintage Jalen Ramsey. Like, let's just be clear about that. But he has made splash plays. He will have games, especially when he is, I think, set up for what he's more able to do now at 31 years old, play in the slot and kind of be that, like, tilt coverages and leverage different mathematical matchups. And at the beginning, when this trade happened, it was all the sort of the running line, and myself included, was this is among the multiple different gestures or signals that you're getting from this Mike Tomlin-led Steelers defense that they are going to take another step in a different schematic direction. They are going to evolve a little bit. And the production has not matched it.
No, and I think when he's pointing out, them struggling to get off the field, it's because good coaches, I think, know what is coming. It is a lot of the same man coverage, blitz type of concepts. And if you wanted to really simplify it, I think it's more of an execution defense. It's more about our players are better than your players. We're not trying to fool you. And it reminds me of the old John McKay quote, the old Buccaneers coach, when he was asked what he thought of his offense's execution, and he said, "I'm in favor of it." This defense,
it's very
not executing.
Very Halloween.
Not executing. Chop its head off. I mean, I love Mike Tomlin. He's such a good coach, but I think Dave Damashek has done a good job pointing out, like, there's nowhere left to point. Like, it's always blame. It's always the offensive coordinator. It's always the offensive line. And I think right now, Tomlin is a big part of the problem. All right, give me what you're haunted by.
I think that somebody is being haunted by some previously very strong comments that were correct made last fall. That is Kevin O'Connell on the Rich Eisen show. And he said these incredibly truthful words: "I believe organizations fail young quarterbacks before young quarterbacks fail organizations." Very true, right? And I think credit to Kevin O'Connell for not only speaking up saying something very plainly and very honestly that's been an issue across the league, all 32, for years, for decades at this point. His comments were not and are not wrong, but they loom extra large right now as the Vikings walk a pretty impossible, haunting even, tightrope with their quarterback situation in light of the Carson Wentz season-ending labrum and arm socket injuries.
Ouch.
And J.J. McCarthy seemingly returning from a high ankle sprain, which was the reason why Carson Wentz, a.k.a. the human shield, was playing through those injuries to give J.J. McCarthy enough time, according to Kevin O'Connell and the organization, to return in a safe and healthy way. And for me, multiple things are true here, based on all the reporting and all the on the record and radio comments and probably continued questions and comments all throughout this week from Kevin O'Connell, from Carson Wentz, from everybody involved in the situation. It seems like he was really pushing to play through this injury, or these multiple injuries, and that can be true while also teams don't protect players from themselves historically. And it's also true that in this case, the Vikings could not really protect the player who they have spent less resources and invested time in from himself. The lesser of two evils in their minds seem to be, okay, let him play and protect our future investment. But that's also failing a quarterback. That's failing Carson Wentz.
Well, maybe it's in the words there. He's okay failing older quarterbacks. He just doesn't want to fail the young one. I think you're right. And I think if you go back to, like, what could be haunting this team, it's their offseason plan.
Yeah.
Because Carson Wentz wasn't there. They wanted to have Sam Howell. I was forgetting. I was like, who was their backup quarterback 2 months ago? It was Sam Howell, who they traded for. That was a bust. I think leaving Wentz out there was brutal when you could have played Max Brosmer last week. Just at least at some point in that particular game, that happened.
And so
I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but at some point the decision was made. Carson Wentz is going to be put down for the year. That might have been Carson Wentz's, like, okay, you used me. I'm good here. See ya. You know, because
if he can't physically play, Greg, you're not going to play.
We literally just saw him do it, so he could, in theory, put off that surgery.
Like I said at the top of these comments, like everything that everyone, including Carson Wentz, is saying out of Minnesota right now is he was pushing to play through these injuries, right? So that can be true, while also this can be a total mess and an organizational failure at the same time. Both of those things can be true because a player will always want to play, and an organization will 9 times out of 10 not protect the player from himself, right? It's very rare. Both of those things are true. It's a fact of the league. You don't have to like it. Fact of the league. But the thing is this franchise, because you're now trotting out, you have 2 quarterbacks on the roster, J.J. McCarthy and Max Brosner. They're probably going to add another guy, but it's hard because there's not a lot of people with scheme or system familiarity. And then you're putting more resources into a quarterback room that you already reshuffled right before the start of training camp. You're throwing whoever's out there behind a bad offensive line that's not playing to the level of the investment. And some of that's injury related as well, but an offensive line not to the level of expectation or investment, and also a run game not to the level of expectation or investment. And when you have all of that, Carson Wentz happens to be the first casualty, the first real, like, noticeable casualty of all of this. But you have to get this right because you have gained the reputation through your very true and correct actions with previous quarterbacks, as well as, you know, your reputation and your very correct words. You've gained this reputation as a guy who gets quarterbacks and is the quarterback whisperer. And like to reiterate, he earned that reputation, but it's dangling kind of precariously right now as those words, as honest as they were, kind of come back to haunt him and the organization, because you could argue that whether or not they got it right with J.J. McCarthy, watching what happened to Carson Wentz, the rest of the system is not succeeding around the quarterback.
And yeah, there's nowhere to hide. I think they were trying to set up JJ in the best chance for success by making sure he's 100% back. Look, do I think if he had played lights out the first 2 weeks of the season, he would have sat as long? I don't. I just don't.
Yeah, and a lot of people are forgetting that he did not look good, but for that one quarter.
Right. And so I think that was a big part of why he had to wait to start longer. But at some point, you know, they had to play him. They would have been playing him, it sounds, I think, this week, whether Carson Wentz was hurt or not. And it's going to be tough. You got the Lions and the Ravens right out the gate for J.J. McCarthy. I am curious who else they'll bring on there. But it's also an opportunity. That's a great thing about the NFL. You're like 1 week away. Like if they could just somehow beat the Lions, then it's like none of this mattered. All that really matters is J.J. McCarthy's development for the rest of this season.
And
so
that quarter against the Bears was enough of a wild card that I wouldn't rule it out. He's got some gamer in him if he's feeling healthy. Like I just wouldn't rule it out. At the same time, the Lions are a wagon on both sides of the ball. And also, like, again, this roster, the defense is not playing up to the level of expectation. The offensive line is not playing up to the level of expectation. All of these things preseason that they tried to construct in order to basically plug in and give this quarterback like a crescendo through the course of the season is just not happening.
Vikings fans probably don't want to hear it, but I'm with them kind of where I was with Drake May in the offseason, and it's like all that matters is J.J. McCarthy. They're probably not making the playoffs this year. But if J.J. McCarthy has a positive next 9 games, that's kind of all that matters for the Vikings. And so that will start on Sunday, and we'll preview that game on Wednesday. Can't wait. Colts. Man, I have a lot of regrets about how I evaluated the Colts. I'm haunted by many things when it comes to picks. But the over-under win totals draft, that's my baby. Hadn't had a loss in 4 years of doing it. And my number 2 pick this year, partly because Nick Wright took the over on the Chiefs, which is looking good. My number 2 pick this year was under on the Colts, 7.5.
Ooh.
Not only that, a couple weeks ago, I flipped my pick on Game Day View from the Colts to the Chargers. I mean, in that game. Just absolutely stupid. And there were so many reasons to see what was coming with this Colts team. First of all, that was like the most obvious, everyone's piling on type of pick. I don't want to consider myself a contrarian, but I do find myself kind of making picks like that. So for me to just go like a lemming and fall right off the cliff, do exactly what Vegas wanted me to do, and and take the Colts so early like they were going to be some sort of disaster based off vibes, whatever. That was stupid. I should have seen what was there, which is weirdly a win now team full of incredible continuity and really good on the offensive line. Now, did we know Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonzalez, I believe you pronounce his name, were going to be as good on the interior? Probably not, but they played pretty well at the end of last season, so there were signs there. But in terms of the weaponry, they've all been in Shane Steichen's system now for years. In terms of their defense, like, it is a veteran group. Zaire Franklin and Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore, and they bring in Charvarius Ward. This is not a young team. Jonathan Taylor, like, if this didn't work this year, obviously they were going to blow it up in terms of the GM and the coach. But also, I think I sort of forgot the players that have been there for a while, and they're good players. And Steichen has proven he can win games without great quarterback play. And so there was a lot leading up to this season, I think, that made us just off target, that I should have been able to see. I should have been a seer. And more than anything, once it started happening, I really should have just trusted it, because I do trust it. I don't think they're going anywhere. I don't think that means they go 15-2, but I think they're the second most likely team in the AFC to make the Super Bowl. And I think the offense is going to be a wagon, as you say, all season long.
They are. And Jonathan Taylor having the season that he's having, I know we're too early. It's not even technically mid-season.
We can hand out some awards next week, so we could say
MVP type of season.
You could say like that he would be your offensive player of the year so far.
He's playing incredibly well. They're explosive. They are getting, their success rate on conversions is like some over 50%, and then some. It's incredible. They're fantastic. And I think a lot of what was maybe the bias that a lot of us, myself included, came into the season with was this sense that Chris Ballard was just going to do the stubborn thing again. And that kind of carry Shane Steichen along in the undertow with him in terms of sticking with Anthony Richardson and trying to make that work because of the investment and because of the evaluation that they had on him, because of the investment they had made into him. And that's not what happened. Instead, they pivoted from a decision that, I think say they pivoted into the right one. Whether or not we still know what Anthony Richardson can eventually be, I don't think. But you can say they pivoted into the correct decision. And they did it kind of without that fear of embarrassment, I guess, of the first decision that they had made to invest in him in the first place. And I think that it's like, we should have just read the tea leaves with Daniel Jones choosing to go there, despite the fact that Minnesota, he had just been in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. And
does he get credit? Does O'Connell get credit for helping to restart Daniel Jones' career, or blame that they could have just paid him $16 million
also
this year?
Could have paid Sam Darnold, just saying.
Right, yeah. But they could have paid Daniel Jones a backup type of contract. He's sort of in between, but they could have paid him $25 million less than Sam Darnold and kept Daniel Jones. I'm going to say I give him more blame than credit.
Well, I'm going to say I give Daniel Jones credit for going where he could see a roster and believe it would be successful. And so, like, we should have all followed Daniel Jones, honestly. But I will say, I'm still stuck on you saying you're not a contrarian. Like, I got stuck on that at the beginning of your comments.
No, I said I would not want to.
Still stuck.
No, what I was saying was which is kind of a funny thing for a contrarian to say. I would not want to think of myself that way, but I'm open. I'm admitting.
Don't put on the internet that I'm a contrarian.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm basically saying that I recognize that in myself. All right, one more thing that's haunting you.
Well, I'm an optimist, Greg. So I picked something that is hauntingly beautiful, like a treasured spirit that's come into your life, or a treasured soul from your past. This is the Chargers offense, specifically out of their heavier personnel groupings, with Joe Alt back and activating Scott Matlock at fullback and activating all of these different tight ends, including Omarion Gadsden, in the passing game so you can stay in the heavier personnel. Kamani Vidal, 23 of his carries, or on his 23 carries last week, 20 of them were out of a heavier personnel. So that's either with a fullback added, or multiple tight ends added, or 6 offensive linemen and a fullback added in Scott Matlock. Jarrett Patterson, not on his 11 carries, 10 of them were in heavier personnel. This is all according to Next Gen Stats. The Chargers had 207 total rushing yards, including 62 by Justin Herbert, who clearly feels more confident using his legs, and especially when they can block it up for him, and especially when they've got these like human sequoia trees up front blocking for him. Like I mentioned, you can activate actual pass catching tight ends and stay in your heavier personnels. I just got all tingly, watching it. And especially there was like a 2nd and 6 where it was all of them lined up and Scott Matlock was in and they had 2 tight ends and they had a running back as well as the fullback. And it was just this wall of people.
It's everywhere. It's your league. Your league right now.
Hauntingly beautiful.
The Eagles had 12 snaps of 6 offensive linemen.
Extra offensive line.
And they're just using, they call it a tight end, but it was just Patrick. It's like basically just another
it's a declared
tight end. The Texans went nuts, cranking up more 6 offensive lineman snaps in that game almost than the rest of the season combined. Patrick Ricard returned for the Ravens, who I kind of feel like is an offensive lineman. So yeah,
kind of a Jenga piece.
Heavy
weirdly.
Personnel is happening everywhere.
It is.
All right, let's talk Thursday Night Football. Okay, these are 2 teams, the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football, who are coming off maybe the most encouraging games each one of them has had all season long, who, like a lot of the teams we just talked about, were kind of haunted by backup quarterback decisions. Okay, maybe the Dolphins weren't. But they did elevate Quinn Ewers one week, and he made it all the way to the Throw of the Year candidacy. And now, for some reason, Zach Wilson is back to being the backup. But no, I really do think like the Vikings are haunted by their backup quarterback situation. The Giants for making the wrong one, I think, to start the season. And I think the Ravens for signing Cooper Rush to $7 million when your boy Tyler Huntley was right there all along, gets a big win last week. And I just think there was a lot of encouraging factors for Lamar Jackson to return to. They did confirm, Lamar spoke to the media, he'll be out there, kind of a hometown game for him. And all they need for Lamar Jackson to be successful is an average defense. In the last 2 weeks, they've been average. All the numbers would say they've been right around average. And a good enough running game. And the running numbers have been average success rate over the last 2 weeks. And when you add Lamar Jackson to that, it becomes exceptional.
Yeah, I am really eager to see what this will look like, because we noted this on the recap show on Sunday that Todd Monken called a better game. And this was important for him to do because there had been reports locally of just dissatisfaction around the building of how it was going to that point. He called a better game, and he also called a game that you could see Lamar Jackson dropping into and elevating, obviously, the quarterback position in doing so, but then also you could see all the pieces and how they would pertain to a Lamar Jackson-led offense as well, obviously with a huge improvement at quarterback because this is Lamar Jackson we're talking about. So I'm really curious to see what this looks like. Having Patrick Ricard back is sneaky huge for them too, and activating some of the ways that they want to run the ball and some of the ways that they want to disguise their run pass looks as well. And having this defense, moving the safeties a little bit, Alohi Gilman coming in and adding to the group, and then being able to move Kyle Hamilton a little bit again. We saw this work last year.
Yep.
It's almost like, would you just want to start the season that way? I know they were limited in personnel, so maybe couldn't. But it's like you could start to see maybe this Ravens team is, at least in theory or in ideation, what you're seeing them do schematically on the field, maybe turn a little bit of a corner.
Well, you can kind of like look at the snap counts. It's as easy as that to me, and see who's playing. And it's like, yeah, Gilman's now playing every snap. And Roquan Smith, who did not look right early in the year, and then they sat him down, and that did seem to be one of those injury situations where it was like, you're not helping us playing through the injury that you have. Let's sit you down. They get through the bye. He has his best game of the season by far. That's a massive deal. Marlon Humphrey is so integral to what they do on defense. And then I even noticed last week, like Mike Green has not been that effective for them as a rookie pass rusher, but they just need him. And he basically was out there every snap. He did have a couple splash plays. I'm not saying he's turned the corner, but he's helped. And it's interesting because I know it's just 1 week, and it might just turn out to be 1 week, but I do think it's a tougher matchup this week against the Dolphins, who really showed something a week ago with a lot of diversity in their running game. Certainly Tua Tagovailoa's best game of the season. Jalen Waddle's gone 95 yards or more 3 out of the last 4 weeks, and it might turn into just a blip. But it was a really clean, awesome performance by the Dolphins, especially in the way that they attacked the running game last week. And so I do think it's a tougher matchup than people might realize when they look at a 7.5-point spread on the road.
Well, and I think the Dolphins would probably prefer to not be looked at too closely because coming in as an underdog is helping them. It has helped them. But also, I think a lot of us expected this to be an interim coach by now, possibly even, interim management in the front office as well. And it's not, because these guys are getting a shot genuinely to turn this thing around, or so it seems on the surface, right? And so I feel like it's very interesting to me. I actually have not spent a lot of time truly worried about Miami's offense this year, whether it was, they've for years they've had issues in the run game. Like I won't say that that's perfect by any means.
They need the running game to work better, like it did on Sunday.
But in terms of the way Tua a couple of real stinkers of games, but especially last few weeks, playing better. Some of the vintage sort of timing and ball handling and just different little layers and elements that they add for trickeration, for the handoffs and the misdirection and all of those things, that's there. Jalen Waddle is playing great. Not having Darren Waller obviously is a blow, but Jalen Waddle has really been that guy and been that player who it's almost like he's just like shining a little brighter without a Tyreek Hill also demanding some of the targets or needing some of the targets to go his direction because of his pure speed and ability to separate. So this has had to be sort of a rebuilt on the fly a couple of times this year offense. And if Mike McDaniel can just commit to running the ball, Ollie Gordon you might really have something in complement with Ollie Gordon.
I think he's a player that should be part of their future.
Yeah.
Like he's a short yardage, big physical back. Jalen Wright got into the mix last week. And then Devon Achane is great, whether lined up as a receiver or as a running back. The flip side is where I'm even more curious if it was a 1-week thing or not, because they did make some schematic changes in terms of how they were like lining up their defensive tackles last week, and everyone got on the Falcons. And you did somewhat as well. I don't think it was about like in terms of how much they were using Bijan Robinson. It was more like knowing how to use him.
Exactly.
Because when you look at that game last week, they tried to use him. It just wasn't working. And so is that a 1-week thing? Because the Dolphins do have talented players up front. Jalen Phillips definitely coming off his best game of the year. I would say Zach Sealer is too.
Yeah.
And I think Jordan Brooks has been great all year. They do have some players. The weakness is in the secondary. So that's one where I want to see it more than 1 week. But that 1 week was enough. It really isn't 1 week. If you look at their last 3 or 4 games, every week has probably been their best game of the season.
Well, they're all hot seat games for everybody.
Right. Even the Browns game defensively, like I know they were playing the Browns, but they gave up around 200 yards in that game. The defense was fine. So I'm always hopeful that we're going to have a more interesting game to talk about on the Thursday night recap.
Yes.
But
So is that booth.
Yes, I do think they showed some things last week that at least make me think, okay, maybe they're a little closer to the 7-10, 8-9 Dolphins that maybe some people expected before the season than they are to this total problem. The problem is that they're playing, the best offense in the league when it's healthy, and it's quite one of them, and it's quite healthy.
And also, if it goes horribly, horribly, horribly wrong, just a couple of days before the deadline, the Ravens might be getting a great look at a pass rusher they should try to make a move for and see if that works.
Ooh, that's good, because I think Bradley Chubb is probably more likely to be traded, but he hasn't really been that effective this year. Has a big number. Jalen Phillips is a really interesting young player who you could think about trying to sign long-term after you trade for him. But I think the Dolphins should be trying to sign him long-term because you're always better that second year.
Yeah, you might be frozen, though, whether you're offloading or extending if you don't know if you're going to have a job at the end of the year.
That's a great point. So that's why a team like the Ravens could bring him in. They could think, hey, we'll tag him if we can't work out a deal, something like that. Thursday Night Football, I think the Dolphins maybe keep it closer than 7.5. Why not?
Ooh.
That's it for today's show. We will be back on Wednesday. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Honkers Anonymous. What did we call it? Honking?
Haunted honkers.
It's just
all bad. It's all bad. All of it's
end
bad.
the show. Spooky. It's gonna stay spooky all week. See you Wednesday.